In a bustling Atlanta bank, a teller named Karen Holt slapped the hand of black customer Nia Jackson for reaching over the counter, sparking outrage. But by the next morning, $2.1 billion had vanished from the bank system, and no one saw it coming. Nia Jackson stood at the counter of First Atlantic Bank's downtown Atlanta branch, her hands steady as she handed over a deposit slip. She was 34, a cybersecurity consultant with a reputation for precision and a quiet confidence that came from years of navigating high-pressure environments. Nia was dressed in a navy blazer and slacks, her natural hair neatly coiled, her expression calm but focused. She'd come to deposit a $10,000 check from a recent contract, a routine transaction she'd done countless times. But today, something felt off the moment she approached the teller. Karen Holt, a 52-year-old bank teller with 20 years at First Atlantic, was behind the counter. Her thin lips were set in a tight line, her eyes scanning Nia with a scrutiny that felt more personal than professional. Karen had a reputation among her colleagues for being efficient but curt, especially with certain customers. She took Nia's deposit slip and check, her movement sharp, and began processing the transaction without a word. Nia noticed the silence, but brushed it off. She reached across the counter to point at a discrepancy on the receipt Karen had just printed. "Excuse me, the account number's wrong," Nia said, her voice polite but firm. "It should end in 4723, not 4728. Karen's eyes flicked up, and without warning, she slapped Nia's hand away from the counter. "Don't reach over," she snapped. "You're not supposed to touch anything." Nia froze, her hand stinging from the contact. The bank lobby was busy, but the sound of the slap drew attention. A few customers glanced over, their expressions ranging from shock to discomfort. Nia's heart pounded, not from pain but from the humiliation of being treated like a child, or worse. She pulled her hand back, her voice low but steady. "You didn't need to do that. I was just pointing out an error." Karen didn't apologize. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, her tone dripping with condescension. "I've been doing this job longer than you've been alive. I don't need you telling me how to do it." Nia's jaw tightened. She was used to microaggressions, subtle slights about her competence, assumptions about her background, but this was overt, physical, and public. She glanced at the nameplate on the counter. Karen Holt, senior teller. "I'd like to speak to your manager," Nia said, her voice calm despite the anger simmering beneath it. Karen scoffed, crossing her arms. "For what? You're making a scene over nothing. The manager's busy." Nia didn't back down. "Get the manager. Now." The standoff drew more eyes, and a hush fell over the nearby customers. Karen hesitated, then rolled her eyes and picked up the phone, muttering something under her breath. A few minutes later, the branch manager, David Ellison, appeared. He was in his late 40s, with a receding hairline and a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "What's the issue here?" he asked, glancing between Nia and Karen. Nia explained the situation, her words measured but firm. "I pointed out an error on my receipt, and Ms. Holt slapped my hand. That's unacceptable. I want this addressed." David's smile faltered, but he turned to Karen, who immediately defended herself. "She was reaching over the counter, which is against policy. I was protecting bank property." "That's a lie," Nia said, her voice rising slightly for the first time. "I didn't touch anything. I pointed at the receipt because you entered the wrong account number. You could have asked me to step back, but you chose to hit me." David raised a hand, his tone placating. "Let's all calm down. I'm sure this was a misunderstanding. Ms. Jackson, we'll correct the account number and process your deposit. No harm done." Nia's eyes narrowed. "No harm done? She physically assaulted me. I want a formal complaint filed, and I want her disciplined." Karen smirked, clearly expecting David to dismiss the issue. David, however, looked uncomfortable, aware of the customers watching and the potential for bad publicity. "We'll look into it," he said vaguely. "I'll take your statement, and we'll follow protocol." Nia wasn't satisfied, but she knew pushing further in the moment wouldn't help. She provided a written statement, corrected the deposit, and left the bank, her hands trembling as she gripped her purse. Outside, She called her husband, Malik, a software engineer who'd been her partner for 10 years. "You won't believe what just happened," she said, recounting the incident. Malik's voice was tight with anger. "She hit you? Nia, that's assault. We're not letting this go." "I know," Nia said. "I'm filing a complaint with corporate and I'm thinking about legal options. But I need to calm down first." That evening, Nia sat at her home office, her laptop open as she drafted an email to First Atlantic's corporate office. She detailed the incident, including Karen's actions and David's dismissive response. She also posted about it on her professional LinkedIn account, keeping the tone factual but powerful. "Today, a bank teller at First Atlantic physically struck my hand for pointing out an error." The manager downplayed it. "This is not just poor service, it's discrimination and assault. I'm sharing this because no one should be treated this way." The post gained traction quickly, with colleagues and strangers alike expressing outrage and sharing similar experiences. What no one at the bank knew was that Nia wasn't just a cybersecurity consultant. She was one of the best in her field. She'd worked with Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, and financial institutions, identifying vulnerabilities in their systems and preventing catastrophic breaches. Her firm, Jackson Security Solutions, had a client list that included some of the biggest names in tech and finance. Among them was First Atlantic Bank, though Nia hadn't been directly involved in their contract. Her team had recently completed a penetration test for the bank, identifying several weaknesses in their digital infrastructure. The report had been delivered to First Atlantic's IT department, but Nia knew from experience that many institutions were slow to act on such findings. As Nia drafted her complaint, her mind wandered to the bank system. She wasn't planning anything reckless. She was too professional for that, but her expertise gave her a unique perspective. She knew the bank's defenses were porous, their encryption outdated in critical areas. It was a fleeting thought, one she pushed aside as she hit send on her email. But the incident with Karen had lit a spark, not just of anger, but of determination. Nia wasn't going to let this slide, and she had resources most people didn't. By the next morning, First Atlantic Bank was in chaos. At 6:47 a.m., the bank's IT team received an alert. $2.1 billion in assets had vanished from their system. Accounts showed zero balances, transactions were frozen, and the bank's internal servers were locked. The breach was sophisticated, leaving no immediate trace of how it had happened or who was responsible. Panic spread through the executive suite as the CEO, Margaret Warner, was called in for an emergency meeting. Margaret was a seasoned leader, known for her calm under pressure, but this was unprecedented. "How does $2.1 billion just disappear?" she demanded, her voice sharp as she faced the IT director, Rajesh Patel. Rajesh, a brilliant but overworked engineer, was sweating as he explained the situation. "It's a targeted attack," he said. "The intruder bypassed our firewalls, encrypted our data, and wiped the transaction logs. We're locked out of our own system." "Do we know who did this?" Margaret asked. "Not yet," Rajesh admitted. "But it's someone with deep knowledge of our infrastructure. This wasn't a random hack." As the bank scrambled, Nia's LinkedIn post went viral, racking up thousands of shares and comments. News outlets picked up the story, with headlines like "Black Woman Assaulted by Bank Teller, Demands Justice." Protesters gathered outside the Atlanta branch, chanting for accountability. Karen Holt was suspended pending an investigation, and David Ellison issued a public apology, but it was too little, too late. The bank's reputation was crumbling, and the timing of the cyber attack raised questions. Nia watched the news unfold from her home office, her phone buzzing with messages from colleagues and reporters. She hadn't expected her post to gain such traction, but she wasn't surprised by the bank's vulnerability. She'd seen their weaknesses firsthand. What she didn't know was that her firm's recent penetration test had inadvertently caught the attention of a third party, a hacker collective known as ShadowNet, which specialized in targeting institutions with poor ethics. ShadowNet had accessed Nia's report through a leak in First Atlantic's IT department and used it to plan their attack, timing it to coincide with the public outcry over Nia's incident. ShadowNet's leader, a figure known only as Cypher, sent Nia an encrypted message that morning. "We saw what happened to you," it read. First Atlantic needed a wake-up call. "Consider this our contribution. Stay safe." Nia stared at the message, her heart racing. She hadn't orchestrated the attack, but the timing was uncanny. She deleted the message and secured her system, knowing she needed to stay above suspicion. At First Atlantic, the FBI was called in, with cybercrime specialists combing through the bank servers. By noon, they recovered a portion of the funds, but $800 million remained untraceable. The bank's stock plummeted, and customers began withdrawing their money, fearing a collapse. Margaret Warner held a press conference, promising transparency and vowing to hold those responsible accountable. Behind closed doors, she grilled her team about the penetration test report, which had been ignored for weeks. "Who knew about this?" she demanded. Rajesh admitted that Nia's firm had conducted the test. "Jackson Security Solutions flagged the vulnerabilities," he said. "We were planning to address them, but—" "You didn't prioritize it," Margaret cut in, her voice icy. "And now we're bleeding billions." The FBI questioned Nia that afternoon, their approach professional but probing. "Ms. Jackson, your firm tested First Atlantic system," the lead agent, Sarah Nguyen, said. "And you had an altercation at their branch yesterday. Can you explain your whereabouts last night?" Nia was prepared. "I was home with my husband, working on a complaint against the bank," she said, providing timestamps from her email and LinkedIn activity. "My firm's report warned First Atlantic about their weaknesses. If they'd acted on it, this might not have happened." Agent Nguyen nodded, taking notes. "We'll need access to your firm's records and any communications related to the test." "Of course," Nia said, her voice steady. She knew her firm was clean, and she had no direct connection to ShadowNet. But the coincidence wasn't lost on her, and she felt a mix of relief and unease. In the days that followed, First Atlantic's troubles deepened. The bank recovered most of the funds, but the reputational damage was irreversible. Customers closed accounts, and regulators launched an investigation into the bank's security practices. Karen Holt was fired, and David Ellison resigned under pressure. Nia's complaint led to a settlement, with First Atlantic paying her $250,000 for emotional distress and issuing a public apology. ShadowNet never claimed responsibility, and the FBI's investigation stalled, unable to trace the remaining $800 million. Nia used her settlement to fund a nonprofit focused on cybersecurity education for underrepresented communities, turning her experience into a force for change. She also strengthened her firm's protocols, ensuring no future leaks could be exploited. First Atlantic never fully recovered. The bank was acquired by a competitor within a year, its name fading from the financial world. Nia, meanwhile, became a sought-after speaker, sharing her story at conferences and inspiring others to demand respect and accountability. She didn't orchestrate the bank's downfall, but her actions, her courage in speaking out, her expertise in exposing vulnerabilities, set the stage for a reckoning. And in that, she found justice, not just for herself but for everyone who'd been dismissed, disrespected, or slapped down by those in power.